Forget everything you learned about the destruction of ancient cities in school. The famous tragedy of Pompeii was a slow and peaceful event compared to the absolute nightmare that annihilated the Jordan Valley 3,600 years ago. In exactly 2 seconds, the largest and richest metropolis of the Bronze Age was not just destroyed or abandoned, it was literally vaporized. There was no prior warning. There was no great invading army with swords and torches, and there was no catastrophic earthquake breaking its walls. What the world's greatest archaeologists have just unearthed at the exact location that ancient texts call Sodom is so terrifying that it forced skeptical scientists to admit the unthinkable. A literal inferno of heat fell from the sky on that forgotten afternoon, melting solid bricks as if they were wax and transforming thousands of human skeletons into a microscopic cloud of dust. Prepare your breath, because cutting-edge science has just proven the most terrifying and lethal physical event in all of human history. For countless millennia, the tragic fate of this monumental city echoed through the generations purely as a legend. A grim story, a stern cautionary tale written in the ancient pages of the Book of Genesis to dictate moral rules and frighten the civilizations of the ancient world. For the vast majority of modern historians, geologists, and academics, the simple idea that a rain of fire and brimstone could plummet from the clouds and erase an entire empire from the map was considered an impossible mythological fable. The rigorous scientific consensus, built in the greatest universities on the planet, categorically affirmed that grandiose civilizations, built with massive stones and thick defensive mud walls, do not evaporate into thin air in a fraction of time. They leave behind solid foundations, tools, weapons, and organic ruins. Cities fall slowly under the relentless weight of time, or due to long military sieges, never in the snap of a finger. But the scorching desert is a silent and brutal vault, and the earth, layer by layer, possesses an exact stratigraphic memory that no skeptical academic theory can silence forever. This unshakable historical consensus began to crumble drastically and irreversibly when a research task force decided to challenge the comfort zone of traditional academia. This was not an ordinary group of excavators looking for old coins or cracked clay pots. It was an international elite team uniting veteran archaeologists, top-tier particle physicists, astroscientists, and world-renowned experts in space impacts and craters. They turned their modern, ground-penetrating radars and probes to a remote and dusty location in the arid Jordan River Valley. An immense scar in the landscape swept by the relentless wind, known by locals as tall el-Hammam. Under countless tons of fine sand and a deep oblivion, rested the sleeping remains of what, in its peak of glory, was a formidable commercial empire, boasting a size and military power tens of times greater than the famous ancient cities of Jerusalem or Jericho. The archaeological excavation work requires almost superhuman patience, removing the thick dust millimeter by millimeter over grueling months under the scorching Middle Eastern sun. But, upon piercing the sandy soil until reaching the exact depth corresponding to 3,600 years in the past, attested and confirmed by the most rigorous and modern radiocarbon tests, the tedious excavation routine gave way to a paralyzing dread. The clear and common desert sand was suddenly swallowed by an inexplicable physical anomaly. Scientists came across a gloomy strip of earth, deep charcoal in color, measuring almost 1.5 meters of constant thickness. A dense layer, composed entirely of dark ashes, shattered charcoal, and countless violently pulverized debris, which they promptly baptized with the disturbing name of Destruction Matrix. In the desperation to keep reason intact and traditional science standing, historians tried to rationalize the discovery by pointing to gigantic urban fires of the ancient world, or bloodthirsty conquerors burning enemy fortresses. However, what they found intimately mixed in those deadly ashes violently shattered any human, terrestrial, or martial explanation. The everyday pottery pieces, the exact plates and cups used by local families minutes before the end of everything, were not merely cracked. Their surface was completely melted, boiled from the outside in and transformed into a bizarre greenish glass. For solid clay to undergo such extreme vitrification, the environment needs to be exposed to a heat shock so instantaneous and absurd that absolutely no furnace, tool, or military technology in the entire history of the ancient world could manage to generate it. To decipher the demonic force that relentlessly disintegrated that city, the scientists swallowed hard as they realized they would have to stop looking at the ground and start seeking answers in the dark and silent abyss of outer space. When the first fragments of that bizarre greenish pottery arrived at the counters of high-tech laboratories scattered across the most prestigious universities in the United States and Europe, materials physicists simply could not believe the data frantically jumping on the screens of their modern mass spectrometers. What those renowned scientists held in their hands was by no means the organic result of a common urban fire that got out of control on a windy night. For the dry clay and baked mud that formed the decorated jugs, the meal plates, and even the imposing and massive bricks of the city walls to suffer that extreme and drastic level of structural alteration, a heat peak that defies the very understanding of traditional geology and materials, physics was strictly necessary. They were looking in stupor at the consequences of an extremely violent chemical process known in modern science as vitrification. And vitrification, under no natural circumstance on the Earth's surface, happens by a mere accident to melt the sand and thick mud until they completely lose their original shape, chemically fuse and transform into a shimmering, shapeless liquid glass. The ambient temperature does not just need to be high, it needs to be apocalyptic. Laboratory tests indisputably revealed that, to generate those crusts of melted glass on the bricks of Sodom, the air around the entire city had to surpass the terrifying mark of 2,000 degrees Celsius. And the most horrifying detail of this scientific discovery was not just the monstrosity of the temperature itself, but the relentless speed with which it embraced the metropolis. The microscopic air bubbles, which were eternally frozen inside that ancient glass at the exact instant it cooled, told a horror story fractioned into milliseconds. The heat did not rise gradually, as it does inside a conventional oven, giving people time to run or seek shelter. It exploded instantaneously over the streets and squares, reaching its maximum peak of annihilation in the blink of an eye, transforming the afternoon breeze into an invisible and lethal furnace, considerably hotter than the incandescent and bubbling magma violently expelled by the core of a volcano in full eruption. Faced with such astonishing and undeniable numbers, the international team of researchers began to methodically eliminate the obvious suspects, one by one. Could it be possible that the skilled blacksmiths or experienced potters of the Bronze Age had provoked, by a miscalculation, a cataclysmic accident that swallowed the entire city? The answer, supported by all the vast and undeniable existing archaeological literature, was a resounding and absolute no. The most powerful, ingenious, and advanced industrial furnaces of all antiquity fought bravely to maintain temperatures that barely surpassed the mark of 1,000 degrees Celsius, and even then, only in extremely controlled, closed, and tiny combustion environments. Was it then the result of a brutal military tactic orchestrated by a bloodthirsty enemy empire? Again, science discarded the idea with immense ease, and even with a certain disdain. Absolutely no army marching on the face of the earth, not even the most fearsome, organized, and cruel legions of Egyptian or Assyrian warriors, possessed exotic chemical weapons or primitive combustible materials capable of generating even a small fraction of the inferno necessary to melt fortresses weighing countless tons until they became unrecognizable puddles of melted glass. Human technology of that era was tragically primitive compared to the monstrous and incalculable energy that was mercilessly released over the heart of the Jordan Valley. It was at this exact moment of stalemate that the heavy silence in the laboratories was broken by a logical realization that united, in a spine-chilling way, the cold, technical reports of contemporary astrophysicists with the dusty, ancient pages of the sacred texts of Genesis. If that indescribable heat, capable of outshining the brightness of the sun's surface and that violently surpassed the barrier of 2,000 degrees Celsius, did not come from below, from the bowels of the earth, through a tectonic fault or volcanic activity that we know does not exist in that specific region. And if it definitively was not produced by the hand of man through brutal wars or disastrous industrial accidents, there only remained a single frightening and terrifying direction from which that breath of annihilating fire could have emerged: the open sky. The scientists, many of them admittedly skeptical and atheist, were forced by the incontestable evidence to swallow their own academic certainties and look to the stars in search of answers. What struck that vast civilized population on that sunny and seemingly peaceful afternoon was by no means a simple, unseasonable climate storm, but a thermal event of catastrophic proportions raining directly from the immensity of space. A flare of cosmic energy so densely concentrated and brutally fierce that it incinerated the very oxygen in the air, boiled the sandy soil, and caused the grandiose city to simply evaporate in seconds. Under a flash, infinitely brighter, blinder, and more lethal than the solar surface itself. However, that inexplicable and relentless heat that vitrified the clay was only the first and most superficial layer of this complex millennial mystery. When the team of experts decided to submit the blackened soil samples under the powerful lenses of deep-scanning electron microscopes, with the clear intention of discovering the exact chemical composition of that cloud of celestial fire, what they found secretly hidden in the city's dust would make them question the history of our planet even more. The true and most macabre horror of what fell from the skies, the toxic secret that cursed that land, was still buried, invisible to the naked eye, just waiting to be revealed. The true turning point in this investigation did not occur under the scorching desert sun, while pickaxes struck against stone, but rather in the cold and sterile silence of the geochemical analysis laboratories. It was there that scientists realized that the greatest proof of what happened in Sodom was not in the toppled walls or the melted pots that could be seen with the naked eye. The definitive proof, the unmistakable signature of the culprit, was hidden in the dust itself. When the samples from that dark layer of destruction were placed under the lenses of state-of-the-art scanning electron microscopes, capable of magnifying reality tens of thousands of times, an alien and terrifying landscape emerged from the dirt. What seemed to be just common ash and charcoal to an inattentive observer was, in truth, a microscopic graveyard of physical anomalies. The first discovery that made the researchers' hearts race was the massive presence of millions of tiny, perfectly round spheres, invisible without the help of advanced technology. They were spherules of vaporized carbon and, even more impressively, nanodiamonds. Microscopic diamonds that shouldn't be there. Terrestrial geology is very clear about this. Diamonds form in the depths of the Earth's mantle, under crushing pressures over geological eras, and not on the dusty surface of a river valley inhabited by farmers. The only other way known to science to create these carbon structures instantaneously on the surface of our planet is through a pressure and shock event so violent that it mimics the conditions of the Earth's core. We are talking about the kind of sudden impact generated by the fall of a large meteor, or, in modern terms, by the detonation of a nuclear warhead. The presence of these microscopic jewels of death, mixed into the city's soil, was the irrefutable fingerprint that something from the cosmos had collided against the atmosphere above the Jordan Valley with unimaginable violence. Before we reveal the second toxic ingredient that this cloud left behind, sealing the fate of the region for centuries, if you are fascinated by how modern science is unraveling the greatest and most controversial mysteries of biblical antiquity, secure your subscription to the channel right now. Every week we bring a new discovery that challenges history books. Returning to the soil analysis, the nanodiamonds were just the beginning of the chemical nightmare. While the physicists analyzed the carbon spherules, the team's chemists were perplexed by another impossible anomaly in the dirt samples. The soil of that specific layer was not just burned, it was poisoned. Salinity tests revealed concentrations of salt and sulfates that surpassed any acceptable natural scale for an agricultural region. The salt level was so absurdly toxic that it made any attempt at agriculture or plant life absolutely impossible. The fertile earth, which for centuries fed empires, had been chemically sterilized in a single afternoon. The scientists' conclusion to explain this phenomenon was worthy of a disaster movie. The thermal shockwave and the airburst that swept through the city were so potent that they not only incinerated the buildings, but also struck the nearby waters of the Dead Sea. The released energy instantaneously vaporized millions of tons of that hypersaline water, launching it into the high atmosphere. What followed was a corrosive and deadly rain. A storm of superheated brine and sulfates that fell upon the already devastated land, impregnating the soil with a poison that would last for generations. This discovery finally solved one of the region's greatest archaeological puzzles, the mystery of the 700 years of silence. For 7 long centuries after the destruction of Sodom, that entire area, which was once the beating heart of local civilization, remained completely uninhabited. No one tried to rebuild. No one tried to plant. Kings and conquerors avoided that place as if it were cursed. And in fact, science proved that it was. Not by a magical curse, but by a real chemical and geological curse. The land was literally salted by a cosmic event, becoming a sterile desert that repelled human life for almost a millennium. But if the poisoned soil told the story of the death of the landscape, archaeologists still needed to face the darkest part of their excavation. What happened to the tens of thousands of people who were in the city at that moment? The answer lay in the layers of fragmented bones they were about to analyze. When archaeologists and historians study the final tragic moments of ancient civilizations that were swallowed by relentless disasters, there is a grim pattern that the Earth usually reveals. The most famous and meticulously studied example in all of human history is the ancient Roman city of Pompeii. When the giant volcano Vesuvius erupted, a colossal rain of hot ash quickly buried the streets, the squares, and the houses, mercilessly suffocating its residents. But the volcanic ash acted as a macabre and perfect mold, preserving the contours of the entire bodies for eternity. The victims of Pompeii were found embracing, huddled in the corners of rooms and sheltered under the steps, with their features of terror and agony frozen in time in grim limestone statues. The elite scientists, excavating the thick and dark destruction matrix in the Jordan River Valley, logically expected, in an absolutely logical manner, to find a similar historical scenario. After all, where was the gigantic population of such a vast, prosperous and bustling metropolis? Where were the rulers, the fabric merchants, the mothers, and the soldiers who walked on those wide streets on the fateful afternoon of the cataclysm? What the surgical sieves of modern archaeology revealed next was so repulsive and viscerally sinister that it forced experienced forensic anthropologists to bring their work to a halt in absolute and silent shock. In the majestic streets of Sodom, the fate of human life was not a slow, dramatic, and asphyxiating burial. It was a violent, brutal, and indescribable disintegration. There were no bodies preserved in the dark ashes. There were no warriors in a defensive stance, or mothers embracing their children trying to protect them from the skies. In fact, there was not even a single complete human skeleton in the entire colossal expanse of the immense area excavated by the researchers. What the team found, scattered chaotically underneath meters of that earth, poisoned by toxic levels of space salt, was a grotesque and terrifying carpet of brutally shattered human bones. Countless thousands of bone fragments and tiny whitish splinters, intimately mixed with the melted glass, the fused mud, and the crushed charcoal. For the human skeleton, which is an incredibly resistant biological structure designed by nature to withstand a tremendous physical impact, to be reduced to tiny splinters on an absolute population scale, intense fire and lethal temperature are not enough. Fire incinerates human tissues and flesh, but frequently leaves skulls and larger bones completely charred yet intact. To shatter the human structure in such a grotesque, symmetrical, and devastating way, forensic science points to a single force of physics capable of such a geological atrocity: the pure, invisible, and crushing kinetic energy of a monstrous supersonic shockwave. By carefully cross-referencing the stratospheric temperature data that melted the city walls with the physical devastation of the pulverized mortal remains, the physicists specializing in cosmic impacts arrived at a mathematical number that freezes the blood in the veins of any living human being. The airburst that obliterated the Jordan River Valley was not an ordinary impact of a small asteroid that went unnoticed. The demonic energy released a few kilometers above that vibrant civilization was calculated by the supercomputers of American universities to be more than 1,000 times more potent, destructive, and lethal than the fearsome explosion of the atomic bomb that wiped the city of Hiroshima off the map. 1,000 times more powerful than the most terrible, lethal, and efficient weapon of mass destruction ever created by the perverse and destructive genius of modern man. In practical terms of physiology and human suffering, what happened to the innocent citizens of that metropolis borders on the completely unimaginable. The extreme heat of the celestial explosion was just the first messenger of the apocalypse, traveling at the speed of light, blinding everyone's vision and boiling their pupils instantaneously. Less than a fraction of a second later, an oppressive wall of solid air, traveling at a speed well above the sound barrier and carrying a barometric pressure impossible to be withstood by fragile organic tissues, swallowed the city. The humans and animals did not just have their bodies burned by the thermal radiation coming from the clouds. They were literally torn apart and disintegrated, dissolved by the titanic wind, while the massive military brick constructions imploded around them as if they were made of thin paper. People simply ceased to exist, even before the cerebral cortex could register the roar of the explosion, or the nerves could send a single signal of pain. It was a surgical, relentless, and definitive annihilation of the entire food chain, of human life, and of the local civilization. A celestial purge that left no survivors wandering the streets, allowed no eyewitnesses close enough to tell the tale without going blind, and ensured that not even a single body could be buried under the traditions of the time. But as the gigantic mushroom-shaped cloud, laden with lethal dust and scorching salt, settled over the now dead landscape, silencing forever the weeping of that rich valley, an even greater mystery would emerge. What the astrophysical scientists of the 21st century had just proven through satellites, radioactive isotopes, and scanning microscopes, oral tradition and ancient desert leaders had already recorded and preserved on rustic scrolls millennia before laboratories existed. The disturbing connection between nuclear physics and ancestral papyrus was about to be made. When the scientific reports and radiocarbon examinations were finally published and peer-reviewed in the world's most prestigious archaeology and astrophysics journals, a collective and undeniable shiver ran down the spines of historians and theologians across all continents. The cold, calculating, and skeptical language of 21st century science had officially classified the cataclysm that annihilated the metropolis of Tall el-Hammam as a colossal cosmic impact event. The academic jargon spoke repeatedly of a supersonic airburst, fulminating thermal radiation, and asteroid fragmentation at hypervelocity. However, for scholars of the ancient scriptures, that ultramodern technological terminology was merely an updated translation of an absolute terror that had already been witnessed, documented, and preserved millennia before the first microscopes were invented. What brilliant scientists today were reading on the screens of their modern supercomputers, ancient desert tribes had recorded in terror on old scrolls. To understand the magnitude of this connection, a grim exercise in historical empathy is required. The nomads, shepherds, and patriarchs of the Bronze Age did not possess space telescopes, high-precision seismographs, or any primitive vocabulary to describe nuclear physics or the atmospheric friction of an invading meteor. How could a human mind from antiquity, completely devoid of astronomical knowledge, possibly describe the violent detonation of a celestial body in the sky of their city? They used the only language available, the language of what their wide-open eyes saw and what their skin felt burning. The sacred text of Genesis asserts in a visceral way that, on the fateful day of judgment, the heavens poured a rain of fire and brimstone over the city of Sodom. The detail of the brimstone is absolutely and frighteningly precise from the perspective of modern astrophysics. When a rocky meteor, rich in space minerals, undergoes extreme combustion and explodes violently in our atmosphere, the monstrous chemical reaction generates a plume of smoke that exhales an unbearable, pungent, and asphyxiating sulfuric smell that permeates the air for hundreds of kilometers. What modern science coldly calls meteorite impact aerosols, the Bible translated, with millimeter visual and olfactory precision, as brimstone and flaming stones plummeting relentlessly from the clouds. The ancient biblical account continues with a specific visual detail that for many centuries was ignored by arrogant skeptics as a mere poetic or literary exaggeration. The ancestral text describes that, on the morning after the total annihilation, the patriarch Abraham looked from the top of the peaceful mountains toward the destroyed valley and saw a dense, thick, and black smoke rising from the dead earth, rising to the heavens similar to the smoke of a gigantic furnace. For modern astrophysicists, accustomed to modeling thermonuclear warhead explosions and asteroid impacts, this description is not poetry. It is an eyewitness account, frighteningly exact and disturbing, of the formation of a colossal incandescent mushroom cloud. The formerly rich and moist earth of the valley, now intimately mixed with the smoldering ashes of thousands of pulverized victims and vaporized debris, continued to burn in embers and expel toxic aerosols, creating a thick thermal column that obscured the sunlight for continuous days after the monstrous supersonic shockwave had silenced the metropolis forever. And then emerges from the texts the most enigmatic, bizarre, and world-famous detail of this entire cosmic narrative: the tragic punishment of the woman who dared to look back during the desperate escape and was instantaneously transformed into a pillar of salt. While strict and pragmatic science prefers not to delve into the literal biological mutation of a human being into a crystalline rock, the immutable geological data discovered in the black soil of the destruction matrix provides a terrifying context that validates the brutal essence of the nightmare experienced. The thermal explosion that outshone the sun vaporized the shallow waters of the Dead Sea in milliseconds, lifting billions of liters of dead and supersaline water into the high atmosphere. Moments later, this colossal mass fell back to Earth like an asphyxiating, boiling, and caustic mantle. The toxic wind and the corrosive brine rain relentlessly coated everything they touched: stones, frightened animals, burning ruins, and, inevitably, any lagging fugitive who failed to escape the shockwave in time were buried by a heavy, thick, and lethal crust of sodium chloride. The old punitive legend suddenly found its physical foundation, buried under tons of earth and proven by geochemistry. The dark and suffocating cosmic dust finally settled over the Jordan River Valley. But the funereal and absolute silence that followed that afternoon of annihilation would relentlessly echo for all eternity. For more than 700 long and uninterrupted years, the once greenest, richest, most vibrant, and most coveted region in all of the ancient Middle East remained a ghost desert, an immense and terrifying no-man's land. The sweet, crystal-clear waters of the local springs had dried up or become completely undrinkable due to the extreme poisoning of the space salt, and the severely blackened soil violently repelled any wheat or barley seed that the winds stubbornly scattered. Neighboring nations, traveling merchants, and nomadic kings, passing cautiously along the edges of that desolate valley, dared not raise a single mud brick or pitch their rustic goatskin tents over those cursed ruins. The primitive fear that the sky might open up again and pour out its incandescent and destructive fury kept humanity away from that open-air cemetery for almost an entire millennium. The scar left on the Earth's crust was so deep and grotesque that it inevitably turned into the greatest and longest-lasting lesson in humility ever recorded in the history of ancient civilizations. But beyond the sterile geology and the toxic, lethal chemistry, what the meticulous excavations of Tall el-Hammam deliver to us today is a profound and disturbing reflection on the very nature of human memory and our fragile, tiny relationship with the dark and silent cosmos. For centuries and centuries on end, modern science looked at the ancient, yellowed sacred texts with an undeniable dose of academic arrogance. We laughed at their epic tales of angry gods and cosmic rains of fire, downgrading their deepest fears to mere childish fairy tales, supposedly created by primitive, ignorant minds who did not understand the complexity of the world around them. However, the greenish glass, the shining nanodiamonds, and the violently shattered bones found deep underground in Sodom force us to offer a sincere apology to the past. Those forgotten people were not inventing moral fables out of their own heads to scare children and dictate social rules. They were the terrified, traumatized eyewitnesses of a real, relentless, and devastatingly lethal cosmic apocalypse. They saw a wandering, flaming piece of the universe collide with our fragile atmosphere and obliterate everything they knew, built, and loved in a single, blinding fraction of a second. And using only the limited words of Bronze Age shepherds and field workers, they documented this monumental physical nightmare with a frightening precision that today leaves the planet's greatest physicists, geologists, and astroscientists slack-jawed and in absolute, reverent awe. The true and spine-chilling lesson that the black, salty ashes of Sodom blow over us today is not just about the dead mysteries of the past, but rather about our own fragile and uncertain future. The firm earth beneath our shod feet is just a small, vulnerable rocky island floating solitarily in a gigantic, chaotic, violent, and immensely unpredictable sidereal ocean. What happened on those vast plains, almost 4,000 years ago, was not an isolated miracle in space-time or a mystical curse that will never be repeated. It was a physical, brutal, and irrefutable reminder that the infinite gears of the universe do not care in the slightest about the illusory grandeur of our empires, the imposing nature of our steel and glass skyscrapers, or the high complexity of our modern technology networks. A single tiny celestial body, crossing our orbit at the exact and fatal wrong time, possesses the brutal capacity to transform our most populous, wealthy, and proud cities into absolutely nothing but a new, thin, dark layer of radioactive dust, silently waiting to be excavated and studied by future and unknown civilizations lost in the sands of time. We are eternal hunters of long-forgotten truths, and the tireless journey to unearth the greatest and darkest mysteries of antiquity is very far from its end. If you have made it to this exact moment, with your eyes fixed on the screen and your mind fully open to questioning everything you were rigidly taught in traditional classrooms, you are definitely not just another ordinary spectator passing the time. You are part of a rare and select group of curious and insatiable minds who dare to look deeply past the dusty curtains of time. To make absolutely sure you do not miss any of our upcoming deep documentary excavations, click the subscribe button right below now and turn on all notifications. Also leave your precious like on this video, because your attitude is the fundamental fuel for this message to cross borders and wake up thousands of other dormant minds. And most importantly of all, quickly scroll down to our comments section and tell me your bare, sincere opinion. Do you deeply believe that there are other fantastic stories from antiquity, cowardly classified as mere harmless myths, just waiting for the right sharp tools of modern science to be proven as real and frightening historical facts? What other biblical mystery or ancient legend would you like to see unraveled by cutting-edge archaeology here on our channel? Leave your detailed comment. Definitively join this great and vibrant community of truth explorers and prepare your breath, because the next millennial secret we are going to tear from the depths of the earth could irreversibly and permanently change the exact way you see the entire history and destiny of humanity. We will meet in our next and dangerous investigation.